Hello everyone, my name is David Connolly and today I want to give you a quick overview of the framework we developed for the heating sector in the Heat Roadmap Europe studies. And this framework is essential in our view because it demonstrates the key decisions that need to be made in order to decarbonise the heating sector in the future. And we've broken these decisions down into three key pillars. The first key pillar is heat savings. Almost everyone in the energy business recognises the important role of reducing the end user's demand in order to achieve a sustainable energy system in the future. And in Heat Roadmap Europe, we highlight this as one of the key developments that's required by reducing both the space heating demand and the hot water demand in buildings in the future. The wonderful thing about heat savings is that they can be implemented in buildings everywhere, regardless of whether they're in the city or in the rural areas. And that's different to the other two key pillars that we have in this framework. The first being how we heat densely populated urban areas. In other words, we can reduce the heat demand, but we cannot eliminate it. And because we cannot eliminate it, we have to come up with a method to supply the heat in our urban cities. And these urban areas are very unique because in these areas, the buildings are located close enough together so that you can share a common heating infrastructure or a common heating grid. And there are three main grids that people often talk about. The gas grid, which shares natural gas to heat buildings, a water grid, which is often referred to as district heating, which shares hot water to heat buildings, and the electric grid, where you can share an electric infrastructure. We don't deal so much with the electric grid in Heat Roadmap Europe because we see gas grids and district heating grids as the main alternatives for the future, and the primary one we recommend is district heating using a water-based grid, and I'll talk a bit more about that later on. Outside of the urban areas, we have more sparsely populated rural areas, and these are unique again because in these areas buildings are not located close enough to one another to share a common infrastructure, and as a result they have to produce the heat with their own individual heating technology. And those are technologies such as boilers, be it oil boilers or biomass boilers, or electric based infrastructure like heat pumps or electric heating, and there's other technologies also, but these are the primary ones. So in a way you could say that this framework represents the key decisions that policymakers need to make when it comes to decarbonising the heating sector in the future. How much should we reduce our heat demand by using heat savings? With the remaining heat demand that's left, how should we supply that heat demand in the urban areas, and how should we supply it in the rural areas? In the Heat Roadmap Europe series, we've made recommendations for each of these three key pillars. With heat savings, we recommend that the heat demand is reduced by approximately 30 to 50% in the future. That means that at least half of the heat demand will be with us in the long term in the heating sector, and this is why it's so important to try and figure out how we sustainably supply that remaining heat demand. In the urban areas, we strongly recommend district heating as the most sustainable way to supply the heat demand in densely populated cities, and we recommend in Europe that can supply at least 50% of the heat demand. And that's something we discuss in more detail in a later video. The other remaining heat demand is in the rural areas, and in these areas we strongly recommend electric heat pumps, be those air source heat pumps or ground source heat pumps. And that's due to their very high efficiency and the sustainable resources that they utilize, be it wind and solar power. We expect that there will be smaller shares of solar thermal and biomass boilers to support the heat pumps in the rural areas, but predominantly electric heat pumps are what we recommend as the primary technology going forward. So this summarizes the key points I wanted to illustrate in today's video. First of all, the framework that we've developed, be it heat savings, urban heating and rural heating, and secondly our key recommendations. A heat demand reduction of 30 to 50% while supplying the remaining heat demand that's left by a combination of district heating in the cities and primarily electric based heat pumps in the countryside. There's a more elaborate description here on the final conclusions page, and please look out for follow-up videos that will describe each of these recommendations in more detail. Thank you for listening. Goodbye.